Emrah Bey, 40 kişi olduk. Başlayabiliriz herhalde, siz de uygunsanız. Çok kısa bir merhaba diyeyim isterseniz ben herkese, sonra size bırakayım. Uygun olursa.
Tabii ki.
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Today we have Emrah Goker here with us. He is the Project Development Management from our Project Development and Technology Transfers Directory office. And he will be giving us a presentation today. And Emrah Bey, thank you for this wonderful and very resourceful presentation. And I leave the floor to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Tuğçe. Well, I've been working in the Research Support Office for the last 7 years. Before that, I have like 5 to 6 years under my belt in the civil society sector as a project manager and project developer. Before that, I was a sociologist and a political scientist for some time. I didn't complete my Ph.D., but I was involved in social scientific research. So maybe from these 3 perspectives, I will be able to share some of my experiences. I'm not going to say a lot of new things about developing a grant proposal. Some of the stuff I picked from some of the resources already available in the internet, and I will be sharing the slides and you'll see some of the references in there. But I wanted to organize some of my experiences into a couple of slides. I don't have a lot of slides, but maybe a lot of talking points, and I'm going to try to cut them short. To begin, we have 2 parts in this presentation. First, I'm going to talk about grant writing, some mistakes, some tips, some odds and ends, and I'm going to first begin with comparing academic writing to grant writing, just to underline some of the differences when you approach to proposal writing, because most of you, I guess all of you, are graduate students, Ph.D. researchers working on or about to work on your dissertations. Some of you might have already published stuff in academic journals. The approach to academic writing is a bit different in grant writing. So I'm going to try to compare and contrast, perhaps. In the second part of the presentation, it will be shorter, I guess. I'm going to talk about funding opportunities, but keep in mind the mandate of the Research Support Office that I'm working at is also covering the graduate student community. So when it comes to funding opportunities, if you want to discuss some of the stuff that I'm going to talk about shortly though, because maybe another presentation on some of the schemes that I'm going to mention might be called for, but if you want to discuss in more detail, you can always contact me. We can do a one-on-one if you need to, if you want to. So just keep that in mind also. I'm going to talk about about postdoctoral funding mostly, and also another topic that I encountered in my years here from the graduate student community was about extending your stay at Koç University. So I'm going to mention too. Maybe I may be disappointing about dissertation grants, which are mostly non-existent, but I have a couple of pointers on that topic too at the second part of the presentation. Well, to compare academic writing to grant writing, the first point maybe is that the academic writing is a scholarly pursuit, whereas grant writing is writing for sponsor goals, because you are applying to an open call which has priorities, which has its own goals. So you're not only pursuing your own individual unique contributions, when you write academically. You are doing that, but when you write for a grant, for a call for proposals, for funding, you have to investigate, understand the sponsor's goals for what you're writing for. Secondly, academic writing is past-oriented. You've already done the stuff that you are writing a journal article on. You've already completed the literature survey. You already completed your theoretical or field research, and you're reporting on that. But a grant proposal is future-oriented, whereas where you are promising to do work, to do academic work, to do activities related to your project proposal. So there is this difference. It also impacts writing style, this kind of and temporal difference between the two approaches. Your academic writing is theme-centered. It has a theory. It has its thesis, whereas a grant proposal is project-centered. It has objectives. It has a list of activities attached to those objectives. It has milestones, deliverables. The jargon is a bit different. For your academic writing, you have to employ an expository rhetoric. You are explaining to the reader, explaining stuff to the reader, and using some scholarly rhetoric to do that. Whereas in a grant proposal, your rhetoric, it is again a rhetoric, yes, but you are not explaining mostly. You are selling some point, some proposal to the reader, because the reader is going to evaluate whether you deserve funding or not according to the scheme's programs, strategic goals. There is a difference there. For your academic writing, you have an impersonal tone, mostly, though this is not, of course, a universal truth, but you are objective, you are maybe dispassionate. I mean, for most journal publishing, for most of the academic journals, high impact journals you are shooting for, maybe it can be argued that your tone is mostly dispassionate, whereas in most grant proposals for funding, you have a more personal tone. You have to convey excitement, more excitement, so to say, compared to academic writing in terms of the activities that you plan to complete. Academic writing is, again, mostly individualistic. Primarily, it is a solo activity. Maybe in the social sciences and humanities, more so, one can argue. Whereas in most grant proposals, and of course, as we will be talking about, there are individual grants that you also write as a solo activity. But most funding proposals are team focused. You will be needing feedback from your future team members or from your current colleagues. In an academic writing, again, this may not be true for most journals, but there are fewer length constraints in comparison to a grant proposal. But more and more, of course, I can see in academic journals, their constraints about format, about length is as strict as grant proposals, of course. But again, there is a bit more flexibility, so to speak, I would argue, in writing an academic piece. Whereas in grant proposals, this is like very, very strict in terms of the length constraints. Brevity is rewarded in grant proposals. In academic writing, you have a more specialized language based on the discipline you are coming from. It has a very specific jargon, a very scientific scholarly jargon. It is an insider jargon, so to speak. Whereas your grant proposal has to be, in comparison, more accessible, more easily understood. Because in a lot of cases, the evaluators for a grant proposal, compared to the reviewers of your academic article, are coming from different disciplines. Sometimes they may not even be scholars themselves. So the language has to be more accessible in an ordinary, in a standard grant proposal. So just I wanted to extrapolate these two approaches to writing, which of course it's not black and white. They intersect these different styles. For example, in European Research Council grants, which are large scale, almost Nobel Prize-like prestigious grants given to an individual principal investigator, it is more of an academic writing. But part of the proposal is like writing an academic article, but you have to also add some other stuff that belongs to a style of grant writing in these proposals too. So this is not a strict delineation between two writing styles, but it can be juxtaposed. It can be, there may be intersections, so to speak. Let me shut off the laser pointer. I want to talk about some common mistakes in grant proposal writing next. I want to first underline that your pegs might be square, but they might be for round holes, which means, yes, your grant proposal, the main idea in your grant proposal might be compelling, but it can often fail to adapt to the priorities of the scheme, of the specific scheme that you are applying to. So you have to study in detail the program, the call for proposals documents, what kind of language, what kind of keywords, targets, priorities are used. So you have to have a perfect match between the way you write, the way you convey your objectives, your main ideas, adapt this to the priorities of the program. So to avoid that kind of a mistake. Poor planners, this can come into two different ways, this mistake. One, a lot of proposers come up with very vague, very abstract summary pages. Yes, it is called an abstract, but it should not be very, very abstract. It should be able to convey the main portions, the main sections of your proposal. Or secondly, they depart in the actual proposal. If we can yes, thank you. Or those who depart in the actual proposal from decisions they explained in the summary. So your summary and the bulk of the proposal should be consistent. This is also a very common mistake I can observe in some of the proposals that come from our faculty. They may have very big ideas reflected in the abstract, but we can sometimes see that these ideas are not explored in detail in the proposal itself. So to avoid that, there has to be a match between what the abstract says and what the proposal itself says. Sometimes, I mean, it is, of course, there are different writing styles here. Some people want to write a couple of pages like an abstract first, when they write grant proposals and expand on that later. Or they write, for example, if the program says, okay, give me a 15-page, a 20-page proposal, they sometimes want to write their 15, 20 pages, and then at the end, write the abstract. Both are okay, but make sure the two portions of the proposal match. There are also loners. While the proposal is very ambitious in scope, but the investigators are meager. Of course, some schemes by default, they might be calling for one-person shows, but most grant proposals call for teams. And if your goals are very ambitious, that call for actually collaborations, research relationships, that if they require that you have to have a team, but you don't talk about the necessary staff, necessary human resources that you have to have in the proposal, then you have a problem there. Promising too much, too little. Now, sometimes you can, some proposals fail to align between the scope and the duration, or between the scope and the budget that they propose. They may overpromise by including unpaid labor, for example, in the proposal. Some mistakes we have also seen like that. More seasoned researchers, on the other hand, may be reluctant to make bold proclamations about the transformative potential in their project. So do not promise too much and fail to deliver when you write the proposal. But again, promising very little might be bad in terms of the scope of the program that you're applying to. There's another common mistake called throwing spaghetti, so to speak, which is this is also very common. I mean, it might not be a mistake in itself, but sometimes people might feel that they have to do that. You are chasing funding because you have to have funding, but the funding schemes that you find do not talk directly to your interests. So people sometimes chase funding which is not relevant exactly. I mean, maybe which is largely irrelevant to their research interests. So what they do is that they throw spaghetti at a wall to see what sticks. So this is also usually this approach produces weak proposals, but it might also work, of course. I mean, if it is funding and only funding that you're after, and what is available out there never matches your even closely to your interests, you might sometimes try to throw spaghetti at a wall. But usually, in my experience, at least, it does not produce strong proposals. This might be relevant, the running in place mistake might be more relevant for mid-career or late-career researchers, but it is useful to mention it for early career researchers like this community today. Some researchers might appear always busy, like inside a frenzy of activity. Always attending meetings or research meetings, project-related meetings, but producing very little in terms of writing papers or writing grant proposals. So busyness is this disease, I guess, today, not only for academics, but for a lot of job descriptions. It is a currency, maybe for scholars who have had limited measurable success, but keeping busy should also translate to work, actual work, in terms of writing a grant proposal. So maybe you should not slow down. Sometimes maybe you should, but rather than encouraging a researcher to slow down, maybe she can be encouraged to draft grant proposals that set small, measurable goals, rather than these large goals that keep them busy always. But I mean, it is a point that worth considering. Death by 1,000 cuts. It translates into writing a proposal which has a lot of tons of micro criticisms of existing literature, like very small steps. Okay, this person says this person has this methodology, but it doesn't work. There is this theory in the literature, but I'm not comfortable with that. Very micro criticisms of the state of the art, but there are no bold statements. The proposal is all over the place. It is attacking these little targets without identifying a bold statement. I'm just checking the time, and on the one hand, an eighth common mistake might be what we call methods madness. It can show itself as too much technical, methodological detail in the proposal, which overshadows the goals themselves. This can also, I mean, a very common thing, not only in social scientific or humanities proposals, all over the disciplines. People have all of these different sexy methodologies put one by one, like very different methodologies being implemented, but there's this difficulty in integrating them into the matching them with the main goals, main objectives that they are listing. So it doesn't work. It doesn't translate into a very compact proposal when you do that. Try to balance the amount of technical details or the number of different methodologies, or if you are going to have to try to tie very numerous, very different methodologies, make sure that you justify them in terms of the main goals of the proposal. The common question, and I'm sure those of you who are writing or about to start writing your dissertations are also faced with that question, the so what question. You have to be the so what question. Yes, it is also an academic question, but it also is a very common question for grant proposals too. You have to be compelling to a broader audience. You have to make sure about talking to the audience that the funding agency, the program itself, talks to. So you have to, your research proposal has to meet these communicative demands in terms of being able to answer, okay, I'm going to accomplish this, but what impact will it have? Will it have the impact that is expected by this scheme? Who cares if I do this, if I accomplish this? But it is not a general philosophical question that I'm talking about. It is like based on specific to the grant proposal scheme, the donor's objectives, the sponsor's objectives. Think about these two so what and who cares questions from that perspective. If you need, go back to the guide for applicants, to the general program description, go back to some of the, if the funder is listing them, some of the previously funded projects under that scheme. It will help you better in terms of surpassing this so what issue. Finally, a mistake, a feedback fatigue. Yes, feedback from your colleagues, like scholarly feedback, intellectual feedback, but also feedback in terms of just read this. Just read this, and is it understandable? Are there grammar mistakes, typos, whatever? It is useful, but if you do it a lot before submission, it might create a chaos. If you send to a lot of colleagues, a lot of some of them might be your mentor or mentors, of course, more senior researchers, but you have to limit the feedback before submission, because you can be then all over the place and trying to correct some of the things that one person is saying, but correcting that might be going against another thing that another person is saying. So I would say avoid, you find a balance in terms of the amount of feedback you are getting before you submit. But yeah, of course, make sure you get feedback before submission, if you can. Then some success tips in proposals writing. This section is missing, sorry for that. One success tip is to start small, start early, especially for the PhD researcher community. This might be reasonable to start with early career schemes, which are almost always not team-centered, but individual schemes anyways. But these are small, usually small grants, and not these major grants. You might want to go for that, but yet of course, dream big, I would say. If your research, your medium-term or long-term research plans seem to require a lot of funding for staff, funding for travels, whatever, for funding for field research, the requirements of doing large-scale field research. If you are going to require a lot of funding in the next 5 years, for example, 3 years, you have to start to dream big. Plan applying for bigger grants. Talk to your superiors, not superiors, more senior researchers, your mentors. Consult them. Begin reading about and investigating about the program rules of these bigger grants. I know in my experience here at Koç University, there are a lot of, there were and still there are a lot of junior faculty who start with some small grants in the national TÜBİTAK system or in the international system, but that they plan very well ahead. Like, okay, I'm going to shoot for a TÜBİTAK 3501 grant proposal first, and then I'm going to apply for a cost action, maybe look for a cost network for myself to collaborate with European researchers, and then I'm going to go for a couple of medium-sized grants, and my third year, in my fifth year, I'm going to go for this ERC starting grant proposal for 2 million euros for a 5-year project. So yeah, people do that if they need this large-scale funding in the long term. You might not, or of course, you might not need that kind of funding. Then your approach might be different. Always gather intelligence in terms of who got funded in that scheme in the previous years, what kind of research got funded. A lot of sponsors list previous projects in their websites, in their databases that you can search through. There might be, some of them might not be doing that, but if there is information about previously funded projects, make sure you try to understand whether there is a trend. Not always, but sometimes there might be some trajectories of funding research under that scheme. There might be some patterns. So if there are, make sure you know about such patterns. Try to make sure that you spend enough time on writing the abstract and the aims before you expand on the aims and go into the methodological details of the proposal. There is a common recommendation that if you are going to spend, let's say, 2 months on writing the grant proposal, spend half of that time at least on the abstract and on the aims. That's the skeleton, so to speak, of the proposal. Writers of successful grant applications typically report that they spend close to 50% of 50% of their time on writing and revising their abstract and the main goals, main objectives of the proposal. It is a writing style issue. I find in my experience that a lot of junior or senior faculty find it very useful to make a 1-pager, 2-pager sketch of the whole proposal, which might include might always includes the main 3, 4, 5, whatever aims of the proposal and the activities, the methodologies attached to these proposals. Beginning from that kind of sketch also helps to communicate with your research support office, if there is one. Like there is one at Koç University. He is talking to you now, but that there might not be in your future host institutions. That kind of support might not be available, but we research support officers find it very helpful if we get those short sketches of the research proposal for matching that research interest for other funding schemes, for example. Another tip is to demonstrate that you can do it, which means how do you demonstrate that you can feasibly complete the work, complete the proposal that you have in mind, that you have on paper. First, collaborate with senior investigators, if you can, who have conducted similar projects. Get their feedback. Don't let, if you have co-investigators, don't let them appear in name only. Show working relationships with them in the proposal. Present also evidence that you have conducted, if you can, present evidence that you have conducted smaller scale, similar research, similar work that you are writing the grant proposal on. This is important. Your methods and your objectives have to be in consistency. You have to marry them together. They should match. I mean, it is not a one-to-one match, of course, but if you are listing 1, 2, 3 objectives under the main objective in the proposal, and then you have a list of activities, a list of methods, approaches, etc. When you talk in more technical details in the proposal, you have to make sure that there is a consistency between all these activities, these technical things, methodologies, field work, steps of the field work, etc., that they have to be in groups, in clusters, connected to the main research objectives. And I am sure that it is also the same approach that you have in writing your dissertation or writing an academic article. Visualization is, in my experience, it is very important, especially for grant proposals, from the perspective of evaluators, those referees reading these 15 or 10 or 25, whatever pages of the grant proposal. When they see graphic, when they see figures, tables, it is like it. On the one hand, it saves you space, of course, it is useful from that point of view. But if you have visualizations of, for example, how your objectives match on your aims, your methodologies, your activities, visualizations like that, or there are approaches to visualizing the literature review, for example, the state of the art. You can say, okay, there is this theory fighting this theory, and there is this school. So you can have figures representing those kinds of things, of course. So I would agree that there is no thing such as too many figures in a grant proposal. And of course, there has to be a balance. You have to have text to talk in more technical detail about your methodology, but make sure you use visualizations, coloring, etc., to communicate better. Get feedback is something I already mentioned. Getting too much feedback might be harmful, but getting feedback is very, very useful to develop a stronger proposal. Before you submit, even if you can ask a colleague just read this, can you understand it? She doesn't have to write in like an evaluation report, but make sure somebody else reads the text and understands what you're trying to accomplish. You have to be kind to reviewers. You have to make them happy, and like they are not always these sinister people that are trying to cut your funding and make you fail, but you have to see that they are typically burdened with a lot of applications on the table. Usually for example, European grant proposals, most of them before the pandemic, they used to do a desk review and then meet in Brussels for a consensus on grant proposals. So it is like they read hundreds of proposals in one day. So you have to catch them quickly when you write the text, and then make sure that you hold their attention. They might not find your application as clearly innovative, as clearly understandable as you do when you complete a proposal. So try to wear the shoes of the reviewer when you finalize the proposal. You have to love your topic as a final tip for success. Like, besides all these mistake points and success points, you have to develop a topic that you really find interesting, that really speaks to your research interests. If you are unable to do that, if you are unhappy about what you're writing, then it might not be a very strong proposal, and it might not secure funding for you. Now, for this part, some odds, some ends, a couple of points. Why fund you? Like you have to analyze your strong points, your weak points. Of course, in terms of always the rules of the scheme itself, rules of the grants funding program that you are applying to. Most funding programs talk about what kind of minimums in terms of the CV that they are looking for, like this number of years of research experience, for example. A minimum number of single author or lead author articles, stuff like that. Just make sure that you have your, you know your strong points and your weak points. Do not be shy of self-promotion. This is something that I encountered a lot in my work here at Koç University. And it is like for research managers, research support officers in Europe also, they always talk about this when they work with faculty, with early career or late career researchers. Some people might be reluctant to self-promote, but a grant proposal, you have to sell the idea, but you have to sell the point that you are the person that is going to perfectly implement this better than other candidates. So you have to learn self-promotion in a grant proposal at least. And it is sometimes useful to be ready to do what is called in industry an elevator pitch, a short summary that you can make about what's this proposal about. Like if you can, for example, are you able to, this is done in some ERC, for example, in ERC proposals. They listen to you, they give you in the second stage of an ERC starting grant or an ERC consolidator grant proposal, they give you a couple of minutes to make your pitch, to summarize your 15-page, 20-page research proposal. So if you are able to communicate that in a couple of minutes, then it will make you more confident about why you should be funded. There is a work plan jargon in most of the grant proposals. There a Gantt chart where you, for example, list your main activities, matrix them with months. So I'm going to accomplish in the first year this and this. So you on a spreadsheet, you are expected to write that. Make sure you know what a Gantt chart and how it is organized. Some proposals use the language of work packages instead of objectives, for example, or aims. So you organize the proposal into a couple of work packages, which each actually conform to a main objective in the proposal. Even if you don't have to use the language of work packages, make sure you know what it is. You talk about milestones, you talk about deliverables. Make sure you know the jargon and how it is expected in the scheme itself, how it is expected to be used. Now, interdisciplinary, cross-disciplinary approaches, they depend on program priorities. So it is not a default requirement. Sometimes there is this preconception about some grant proposals, but it is not always sexy. It doesn't have to be there. It can be like if you are an analytical philosopher, you're not always expected to collaborate with archaeologists or historians or computer engineers in your proposal. If the kind of research idea that you want to develop requires collaboration with researchers from other disciplines, yeah, that's all right. But it is not a selling point in itself, being interdisciplinary or cross-disciplinary. Yes, but of course, there might be this fellowship, call for fellowships, postdoc fellowships, that is actually calling for an interdisciplinary approach. Then yes, go for it. I mean, you have to do that. It is what the donor is expecting. Again, it is the same thing for university industry collaborations. If it is in the program guidelines that they need a collaboration with industry, small size or large scale, that they are expecting a technological implementation of the program, then you have to go for it. But it again depends. Now you have to, there are some grant schemes where some sub-descriptors exist in terms of disciplines. There might be different scientific panels, or the general panel might be sociology, but there might be sub-panels under sociology, and you have to choose, you have to identify one of these. Then be careful. It is very, very important. When you go to an incorrect panel, then the reviewer that is assigned to read your proposal might not be understanding, scholarly speaking, academically speaking, but he or she might be very unfamiliar with your field. So that is your mistake that you have, because you have chosen the incorrect panel. That another thing, the scheme that you are applying to might allow secondary panels, like you choose a primary panel that is related to the heart of your research proposal, but then it might be that your topic is cross-cutting other disciplines, other fields. Then if it is allowed to choose a secondary panel, consider that. There might be a risk there in choosing a secondary panel, because choosing that panel might mean including other evaluators from other fields who might or might not be understanding your main argument. So there is a risk there, but if it is a must because of the cross-cutting nature of your research idea, then you might have to go for a secondary panel. Be mindful of ethical implications of your research. I find that sometimes, again, not always from social sciences and humanities, sometimes from other disciplines too, researchers, they just see ethical issues like secondary, tertiary issues, but in most grant proposals, funding schemes, you are expected to talk about the ethical implications. How are you going to address issues about research ethics when you do field work, when you do an experimentation or whatever? So you have to spend some time on developing those portions of the proposal too. Again, risk management, talking about that, depends on the scheme. The proposal template might not be asking about this, but if it is, then you have to, again, this is going to win you points if you foresee the risks involved in your research design. If you see the risks properly and address them and talk about plan Bs, plan Cs, it is also important. Some two minor points, not minor, other points, let's say the budget. Make sure you understand the rules and templates in terms of financial details in the scheme. So what are the limits for budget for staff, budget for fieldwork? Is the scheme paying for institutional overhead? Or is it something that you have to pay out of your main budget to your institution? This might be very, very critical for your budget design. So understand the rules. In a lot of good established programs, funding programs, these rules are very clear. If you do not understand, if you can talk to your research support officer, make sure you talk to them. If you cannot, make sure you talk to the sponsor, to the administrative staff in the funding organization. When you start to create your budget items, sometimes I see this in research proposals. For example, the maximum amount is given as €100,000, for example, in the sponsor rules. So I find that the researcher is trying to maximize €100,000 that I have to get this. So I'm going to add this. I'm going to add 2 more months to the proposal. I'm going to add this many travels, etc. Some additional items. But do you really need those budget items? If you can justify, of course, then yeah, go for the maximum budget that they are paying. But make sure that the evaluator sees the necessity of all these budget items. In most schemes, you are expected to explain the justifications. So, I mean, justify well. Everything in your budget design, everything has to be justified. Of course, the details in your justification, that also depends on the number of pages you have for your budget section, but justify well. Now, if you are going to, and in our times where the Turkish lira is not very valuable at all, you might have to buy stuff from abroad and pay for customs. You might, if you are planning for a 3-year, 5-year project, you have to keep these currency changes and inflation in mind. So if you are going to buy a translation service, for example, from the UK, you are based in Turkey. So this is going to be paid in GBP, not in Turkish lira. So what is that going to cost me 2 years from now? Yes, this is very difficult to estimate, but there are ways to estimate such things. Again, if you can, talk to research support officers at Koç University when a researcher is developing a proposal where the budget comes to Koç University and then it is run at Koç University. We help out with the budget design. So consult us if you can, if it is relevant. Keep in mind about like make sure you have some budget items, if you can, of course, according to the sponsor's rules. Publication costs, especially open access, is a very expensive item nowadays, and it is getting more and more expensive. Now, if the scheme requires you to have your publications related to the project open access, then you have to have a budget to pay for these costs. Or, I mean, it might not be a requirement, but you might want to have these articles in the future open access. Then just think about, okay, I have 2 years in this grant. Duration is 24 months. In 24 months, I can publish this, and I may be sending this to the American Journal of XYZ and this to the Journal of ABC. So if you can also plan ahead in terms of the specific journals that you want to publish at, then your open access costs might be easily calculated. Again, the last point on budget, will you need an auditing budget? Some sponsors require that you have an independent party to audit your project, financially and administratively. So then you might need an auditing budget. If you don't have that, then you will have a problem. You have to find the money somewhere, and it is a problem. A final point here in the slide on staff. Again, some schemes might be individual. You don't need staff, you don't need a team. it is paid to you, it is a fellowship. But if you are applying for a more medium-sized and larger grant and you need a team, why do you need a team? And how would you justify that? Are you going to have other faculty collaborations? Are you going to try to fund Ph.D. researchers, MA researchers, or do you need technical staff? You need to, on the whole, balance your collaborations if you are going to have a team. It might be like collaborations with other institutions in Turkey or abroad. So you have to talk about them. Dissemination and exploitation. Some schemes want you to talk about this, about how you're going to communicate your work, how to disseminate the outputs of your research, how you envision the impact of your research. It's social impact, it is scholarly impact, intellectual impact, or if it is relevant, it's technical or technological impact. You have to spend some time on writing about that. In terms of exploitation, your research might have some outputs related to technological transfer issues. It can be patented, it can be licensed, or it is also true for most social sciences and humanities research that in terms of the exploitation might have to be talked about in terms of publications, in terms of writing monographs out of the outputs of the proposal. So you have to address those issues too, if of course the scheme is asking for it. Now, the second part of my speech, I guess I will need 15 or 20 more minutes for this section. First, are there any dissertation grants? Some of you are ABD, some of you might not be yet, but unfortunately these are mostly non-existent. But I have a couple of things to say at least. There is only one single national scheme that I know about, the TÜBİTAK 2214/A fellowship, which allows ABD researchers just defended the proposal, dissertation proposal, and are going to start working on the dissertation. They give this fellowship to do some of the research abroad, outside Turkey. So just there is a web page under tubitak.go.tr for the 2214, and I'm going to include a hyperlink when I prepare the slides, finalize the slides and distribute that anyway, but keep that in mind. It might be relevant for your dissertation. Now, some US universities I know, because we have a couple of, in my own time here at Koç University in the 7 years, I know a few of them. They sometimes have open calls for overseas funding as dissertation grants. So the person is situated at the GSSSH, but that this US university has this call that you don't have to be there. It's just giving free money to support dissertation research on a very specific topic, of course. These are very irregular calls, and the topic is very, very specific. So some lucky researchers were able to match. Now, your supervisor, of course, may have external funding. It doesn't have to be like, the person doesn't have to be your dissertation supervisor, but some faculty that whose research interests are close to you might have already external funding for his or her research. So that person might give you, if there is the possibility of a collaboration, of co-authoring publications, you might have small funding for your dissertation. Now, there is this, you might have heard about this internal scheme at Koç University, Seed Research Fund scheme. This is not open to PIs who are PhD researchers, but if you can collaborate with a faculty, if your supervisor is willing to do that, it is possible. And if your supervisor has research interests that match for this scheme, it is possible that the PI can be the faculty that you are working with, and some of the grant, and it is a small grant anyway, 25,000 Turkish liras for a year, up to 2-year projects are supported under this. But there might be a possibility to support your fieldwork or your dissertation research. Again, similar to what I said just now, writing a standard TÜBİTAK proposal with your supervisor might be possible. As a PhD researcher, you are not allowed to be a principal investigator in TÜBİTAK proposals, but your supervisor, the professor that you want to work with, or it doesn't have to be your supervisor, might agree to write a TÜBİTAK proposal with you so that you can fund your research as well as contribute to that person's research agenda. I would recommend always using the search engine for the European Commission, EURACCESS search engine. It is a search engine for job announcements, for postdoc positions, for sometimes dissertation grants, all kinds of funding in the European Union area, including the associate countries area. So make sure you familiarize yourself with the search engine, I would recommend. Postdoc funding, after you're done finally with the PhD work, and maybe leave Koç University. This topic itself might require maybe another hour, 2 hours of talk, but maybe we can organize it in the coming months. I'll just be brief on that. There are plenty of opportunities for postdoctoral funding. Universities abroad constantly open fellowship calls, especially for European calls. Again, go to EURACCESS. Always there are open postdoc fellowship calls. Of course, these are mostly top-down fellowship calls, which means that they are open at specific topics. The themes are specified, but sometimes they might be covering a lot of disciplines. So just search for postdoc fellowships in EURACCESS. Now, EURACCESS does also have project-funded postdoc positions. So these are not fellowships directly, but these are positions under ongoing projects. If the project is matching your research interests, or if you are interested in spending, working on that project on the one hand, getting some postdoc experience and doing your own research maybe in the meantime, then you might find jobs under these projects under EURACCESS. Now, this is the most important thing that you might be shooting for if you are going to leave Koç University for a European position. The European Commission's not new, but its name changed. It is now focusing more on young PhDs. The Marie Skłodowska-Curie actions under the MSCA. The scheme is called the Postdoctoral Fellowships. Its next deadline will be September 2021. We will most certainly be having a webinar on that next year, maybe in March or April. So I'm not going to talk about a lot on that, but I have tons of documents for previous Marie Curie individual fellowships calls. I can give you all kinds of information. Yes, the name of the Marie Curie individual fellowships is changed to BIRCE to postdoctoral fellowships. Now it only funds PhD, those with PhD, I mean, those whose PhD degrees are no older than 5 years, I guess, or 6 years. So young PhDs, only these. It was previously the individual fellowships was funding all senior, junior researchers, but it is now focused on postdocs. Next deadline, September 2021. There are two ways that you can go for this. One is that it is not a Koç University application. You are going for a European university. You are going to be hosted there. So you contact a supervisor, a professor that you want to work with, and then develop an individual. It is an individual proposal, by the way, a bottom-up proposal. It can be on any topic that you wish. The important thing is that you have to be accepted by the European University. Now, if you are going to be hosted at Koç University, there is a way to do that, but it is going to be you are going to a non-European university outside the European area, like the US, Australia, Africa, Asia, whatever. You are attached to that university, so it is up to 3 years the duration. 1 year of the fellowship has to be spent back at Koç University. So you have time, you spend research time in a US university, for example, for 1 or 2 years, and then you are expected to come back to prevent brain migration. You are expected to come back to Koç University and spend another funded year at Koç University. Now, as a fresh PhD, you have to consult the administration. I mean, talk to us. You are going to maybe get permission from the Vice President for Research and Development for that, because Koç University has to accept your return. It is going to employ you. The university is going to employ you after your return for another year. So this is the second way you can position a postdoctoral fellowships scheme. You can write, of course, not at Koç University, but if you are able to attach yourself with another Turkish university, you can consider a TÜBİTAK 3501 proposal, which is an early career research grant that you can try to develop. Finally, if you want to extend your stay at Koç University, and after that, I will end the presentation and we can go to Q&A. Now, the office of the Vice President for Research and Development announced a new scheme for postdoc positions at Koç University back a couple of months ago, towards the end of 2019. So under this scheme, maybe it is going to be renewed. I am not sure. We can talk about that later. But the previous scheme was that you are a fresh PhD from a graduate school here at Koç University, and you can apply if you agree to apply as a principal investigator, because once you have your PhD degree, you can be a principal investigator under a TÜBİTAK 1001 project. So you apply for a 1001 at Koç University. So you get a post for at least 1 year. And if you get the TÜBİTAK grant, it can be renewable up to 3 years. So the usual TÜBİTAK 1001, of course, does not include a salary, but the university is going to employ you as a postdoc researcher. So on top of that, if you get the TÜBİTAK 1001, then you will have a beginning research budget. So that's the new kind of scheme. But again, another option might be that your mentor, your supervisor might have external funding, and you might continue your post-PhD research at Koç University as a postdoc fellow under that project. That's all I have to say for now. Thanks for your attention. I've been talking for over an hour. Again, I'm always accessible for your funding inquiries. Just email me at this email address, and we can do one-on-ones always, or like email back and forth. I am always accessible. And with that, I guess, Tuğçe, we can go to the Q&A.
Yes, Emrah Bey, thank you so much, first of all, for this very resourceful presentation. I think it was amazing. Thank you. It's also recorded, and we will be sharing it on our webpage and also on our YouTube channels. And we will share the link with you once it's uploaded. So if you have any questions, please go ahead and ask them now. Or if you have any personal, specific questions, you may also use the email address Emrah Bey shared to email him.
I have a short question, if that's all right.
Sure, go ahead.
You mentioned about choosing the correct panel in terms of submitting our grant proposals. I personally had, let's say, a bit difficulty in the past about this because certain countries define disciplines, and let's say if you're doing something interdisciplinary, it might be called or defined very differently in very different faculties and fields abroad. So do you have any, would you elaborate on that, or if you have any more tips regarding that?
From my experience, for example, media and visual arts department researchers found it, I mean, in comparison to other disciplines, they tended to find it very difficult to position their research because, I mean, some of you are working on that probably on these topics. When their work cross-cuts design studies, engineering issues, development of devices, not only design interfaces, but also the devices, etc. So it is a cross-cutting field. And sometimes that discipline is not clearly defined, as, for example, political science or sociology or history is. So yes, there were difficulties. What they do in these cases is talk to the administrative staff in these, whoever the sponsor organization is, just like getting their idea about, okay, should I go for this or this panel? They are usually, these people are usually responsive for these questions. Now, for example, for European Commission schemes, the Commission was aware about these issues, and under the New Horizon Europe program, which is the next 7 years, they are going to distribute fellowships, cooperative grants, etc. out of that program. The panel structure is being changed for some of the social science disciplines, for example. So, but the best advice that I can give is talk to either your institution's research support officers, because they might have a memory and experience about, okay, this kind of research in the past went to those panels. If you cannot access your research support officers, then talk to the sponsors, administrative staff. That's what I can say.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Then I guess to chat.
Yes, we can conclude it. Thank you so much again. And thank you all for joining.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
Yes. Have a great weekend, everyone. And we will share more information with you about the upcoming seminars in the next following weeks as well. Thank you. Bye-bye, Emrah. Thank you.